something today. So what we have here is a panel of individuals who are going to allow us to ask some questions about some of the issues that they have pointed out and that others have pointed out are very relevant to you. And so if we could, to start with, just go down and introduce yourself and what you do.
Hi, I'm James Johnson, and I run all the spiritual care programming at Honey Lake Clinic, which is a behavioral health clinic in Greenville, Florida.
Hey guys, I'm Caleb Grassman. I work for Jacksonville Fire and Rescue here. I'm also a peer support team member and board of directors member for Next Rung.
And what does Next Rung do?
So Next Rung is a firefighter-owned mental health, basically a mental health organization. We focus on PTSD, depression, stress, suicide prevention, that kind of stuff.
Awesome.
I am Trey Edenfield, a captain here with St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. I have our traffic unit, our beach PSAs, and I also am over our peer-to-peer team within the agency, made up of sworn and non-sworn members of the agency.
Awesome, you guys. Thank you so much for being here, and thank you all for your service, what you do. So appreciate Honey Lake and everything you guys do out there. The first question is this, and you guys can answer each one of you, or if one of you has a real specific answer that you think is important. How do we overcome stigmas regarding mental health? And we've seen some real shifts in our culture and some improvements in this area, but it's still an issue. Certainly for first responders, it's an issue. So how do we overcome those stigmas regarding mental health?
One of the things that we've found, really, whether it's, first responders, military, behavioral health, it's just having the conversation. There's something about normalizing the fact that 1 in 4 people have a severe mental health struggle. That's a lot.
That is a lot.
But Christians, and I know that not everybody who comes to this may be a Christ follower, but Christians are 50% less likely to get behavioral health care because of some of the religious, ideologies that are not conducive to.
I thought you were going to say the opposite of that. Wow.
Well, we have such a even within a lot of Christian church families that teach that even receiving behavioral health care is negative, that it's from the devil. And that, we want to help breathe the opposite, that Jesus wanted to bring a behavioral health revolution that he started by bringing health and healing.
I guess I could see that in a church environment, some people might think if you're confessing depression or a mental health issue, they might think your faith isn't strong enough.
Absolutely, and one of the things that we want people to help realize is that whether it's medication, whether it's through therapy, whether through your spiritual care, that God created us as 3-part beings. And the same way, if I broke my leg and would go to the hospital if I was hurt, I would go to a mental health treatment center, I would go see a counselor, I would go see a chaplain to get that mental and spiritual part fixed as well. And we need to talk about it and normalize it to say, hey, this is part of life, and we need to make it, it's kind of like, in the movie Encanto with, Bruno, we don't talk about him. And he's in the house the whole time, and some people even know it, but because we don't talk about it.
We don't talk about Bruno. All right. Yeah. I know you got some stats, Caleb.
Yeah, kind of going off what James was saying. I know in the fire service, mental health stuff and feeling bad about yourself and all that kind of stuff, it's not talked about. Firemen can sit around a table and eat dinner all night and solve the world's problems, except their own. Ooh. They don't want to talk about their own problems. They want to talk about other people's problems and make it where it's fixing their problems.
Yeah.
So like you said, talking about it, getting it out there, making it to where it's not such a stigma. It's a, hey, you know what? This is real. This is not something that we're just making up. This is real. So let's get it out there and talk about it.
From a law enforcement realm, I was born into a generation when I came into the agency in 2001. When we dealt with things, whatever it is, tragedy, evil, hardships, and we voiced that these things were bothering us to our supervisor, we were immediately shut down. We were told, you better not show weakness. Why is that? Well, because your fellow shift mates are going to detect it. They're not going to trust you. So keep your mouth shut and drive on, soldier. That's the attitude that we had for years until about 2015, 2016. Mental health started to slowly make its way to the forefront because we saw so many of our men and women putting the wrong end of a pistol in their mouth. And what came of that is leadership had to buy in and realize we are destroying our own by allowing the attitude of keep your mouth shut and be tough and don't say a word if you were to look at last year's stats of men and women in law enforcement that completed suicide, the highest number were of my generation.
Wow.
Because we were grown into and evolved into, keep it quiet, don't show weakness. You have a job to do, you chose to do it. I made a decision after some incidents I had been in that is no longer, that with this younger generation coming in, we can't sit idly by and allow that to be our narrative, because we're going to continue to see tragedy unfold that can be prevented. We train so hard to prevent, our death in a shooting or in driving or whatever it may be, but we have to focus, and we do as an agency under Rob Hardwick's leadership, on mental health. And now it is a conversation, just like he said. It's normal to talk about. It's normal to speak up. It's normal to say no longer you're going to get persecuted and pushed back down. There is sort of a faith-based touch to it, but we also have to be very careful within the realm of where we work with the separation of church and state. I am a man of faith, so I understand it, and we use that where it can be applied. But overall, you asked the question, we love our people through whatever it is. And when we lead with that, then they follow and understand that we're coming from a place of love, and we're very open and honest, like me in leadership. I let them know I am so screwed up. If you got into my brain, the things I've dealt with over 22 years that really started to come to fruition as I got older, when you lead with that with these younger generation, sit back, because you are fixing to get regurgitated on, to the point where you're going to get to a point, it's going to become like you need a psychologist. I can't help you anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's,
and some people do need that, and that's okay if they need it and go get it. It's not okay if they need it and don't go get it.
Correct.
Because it ends up, like you said, on the wrong end of a
Absolutely.
pistol. And
Yep.
those stats are too high.
Yes.
I don't know if this is related. I don't have any proof of this, but I would imagine that the former that you described, where the environment is you can't talk about it, you have to stuff it, and you end up with some really unhealthy things, that probably negatively affects the type of people that are drawn to serving on St. Johns County Sheriff's Department or even in Jacksonville. And I would imagine the more that you've improved that, have you noticed a difference in the types of people that will even go into that career?
Yes and no. It's twofold. It took some bravery of whoever the men and women were that finally, within fire rescue and law enforcement and the first responder community, to step up and say, we're allowing our own to die at their own hand. Because why? Because we want to be tough guys. We want, we were told to sit, and that was a generation before us that was even worse. So it just continued generation after generation, and it had to be stopped. But to answer your question, I think we're seeing, with the generation that's coming in now, knowing up front, we preach mental health from day one. We actually start in the interview process talking about it, letting them know what's there and available, and that it's okay. It is okay to be not okay.
Yeah.
Because we will find somebody. Just like fire rescue sits in, they have the very tribal community atmosphere all the time. We do too. It's not as, we're not in a station, so to speak, but they know that going in, and I think it absolutely helps them make a decision on this is right for me, and I know I can exist, be productive, and the help is always going to be there for me.
As a civilian, when I look from the outside and I would see like the way that in some recent years, the way that our community was negatively speaking about law enforcement, and then knowing those kind of statistics of mental health, and then you hear about the failures in relationship, and then you hear about the suicide. Like, why would anyone want to go into that career knowing that? And so I think that improving the community relationship, and then like you're talking about, where you focus on these aspects of mental health, would improve the types of people that would say, I want to go be a part of that, because you do feel that support and you do have that encouragement. Were you going to say something, Caleb?
Yeah, I was going to kind of bounce back to the suicide numbers and the showing the signs of weakness. And on Next Rung, most of you, I don't know if you know what we do, but we have a 24-hour a day, 7-day a week peer support team throughout the country. You can text in, call, whatever you need to, and most of the time people want to like talk, just to vent, cry, laugh, whatever they need. Basically, we're there for them. But a lot of guys that will text in, they'll say, yeah, I've been struggling like this for 6 months to a year. And I'll ask them, like, well, why didn't you reach out earlier? And their first thing they say is, well, I didn't want to show weakness.
Yeah.
And I tell them straight ahead, I'm like, listen, the strongest thing that you have ever done is taking that first step and reached out for help.
Yeah.
That is not a sign of weakness.
Right.
That is a sign of strength. And we'll have guys that'll text in that have only been on the job a year or two. And they're like, well, I just feel like, yeah, I did have a bad call, but I feel like I haven't been on the job long enough to be stressed out about this and have PTSD and stuff. And for me, I think about it like this. Sean and I, you and I spoke about this before, but it's not a trauma trophy case. It's not a bad call you get and we're like, yeah, I had this bad, and they cut their head off and put it up here, and I saw this suicide, and it was here, and I had this. That's not how it is.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what they think that it's, oh, I have to put this stuff on my trophy case before I can say, oh yeah, I have a problem. No, it can take one call that can really mess you up. And I've been on the job 17 years, and I've seen some very bad stuff. I say that it's my faith that has gotten me through it.
That's good.
If I didn't have the Lord, I would probably be one of the guys that's texting in and asking for help instead of the one on the other end receiving the call. But these guys they don't think they have another option.
Yeah.
They're like, this is all I have.
And there are options.
Right, there are options. And we say that suicide is a permanent fix to a temporary problem. And the stats, we were talking about stats earlier, so suicide this year, just this year, if anybody saw the news story we did, I talked about the stats on there, but police officers this year, there have been 55 suicides this year alone by sheriff's office. Firefighters, there have been 35, and EMS has been 15.
That's too many.
And exactly what I said on the news that day, one is too many for us.
Yeah, one is too many.
And unfortunately, because of those people is why we have a job, is why we do what we do, is so we can be there for them and help that one.
And this is good because I was talking to Captain Mitchell earlier, and he was saying, like, with what you're talking about, you get a call, you have a little bit of time actually to get yourself ready for that, but sometimes you guys have things to show up. Either at the fire department, at the station, or you're out somewhere in your uniform and something happens and you weren't even prepared for it. And so those are also those traumatic moments because you didn't even have time to even gear yourself up for it. But one with these guys, I would like to say this to all of you, like, they're experts. Experts are there to help you be the best at what you are and who you are, to use your tools. It's almost like when you go to a gym, all the equipment's there. You can go and work out. You can use all the equipment on your own and do pretty good. But if you have a trainer, somebody who can say, based on your body type and your goals, here's the best equipment for you to use, and here's the best way for you to use it, now you're going to get more out of that experience than just on your own. And so what these guys are there to do in organizations like Elbow Tree and some of the therapists around the community, they're there to help you use the tools. It's not weakness, it's helping you use the tools to maximize your own ability to walk through those circumstances. Here's a question I have, and maybe you can answer this question. What are the signs of PTSD? Like, what would be something to look for to even know that I'm even experiencing that?
There's quite a few of them, and not everybody experiences all of them the same, but probably the greatest warning sign for if I have PTSD is, did I experience something in my day-to-day work life, home life, whatever, that was so far out of what should be normal, I can't shake it, and I can't make sense of it. And as a result, I end up with flashbacks. I end up with nightmares. I end up with difficulty sleeping. I have social anxiety. I have problems with hypervigilance. When you come into a room and you're just always scanning the exits. You're scanning everybody and what happens in.
Probably every officer does that.
Because like you're alluding to, these are compounded by training. These men and women are trained, whether it's military, law enforcement, first responder, EMS, you are trained to react to certain situations. But the moment you go through one of them, you start seeing the possibilities of them everywhere. And so you've got increased anxiety, you've got issues with relationships, and you've got issues with emotional regulation. So it can be one of those, it can be all of them, and one of the fields that we're really just starting to wrap our studies around is moral injury, which is what happens when the way I believe the world is supposed to work is not what I experience.
Wow, that's
and I
good.
can't make sense of it. So 70% of the time when people experience PTSD, they also experience moral injury. And so all of those things can be in concert or in isolation.
That's really good. I've never heard that term before, but that's a good description of that. If you see these signs, what's the next step? Talking to somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I want to talk about with the PT is like one of the signs. I know if there's any fire officers in here that have had an annoying rookie, or sheriff's office, anybody that has had those guys that
An annoying rookie?
You
That's
may
what
have
you
had to
said?
turn around and yell at them and be like, all right, man, I'm trying to listen to the radio, I'm trying to talk to somebody, and turn around and yell at them, scream at them, hey man, shut up. I'm trying to do my job here, I need you to stop. Well, somebody doesn't realize that now they're at home. They're driving to Disney World. The kids are in the back seat yelling. They turn around and yell at them like they did that annoying little rookie. Hey, shut up, I'm trying to drive, let me do my job. And then you realize, wait a second, that's my family.
Yeah.
That's the people that I love. Now,
That may be a sign that you're dealing with sin.
now that the stresses that I'm having at work are now falling down onto my family. And that's one that most people won't even realize that is related to that. And but to dealing with the PTSD and stuff, it's again, they don't want to take the first step. They don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure the police officers are the same way, but firefighters are very prideful people. We don't want to show signs of weakness. We don't want to say, yeah, man, I need some help. No, it's more like, no, man, I'm good. We're good. Yeah. So having that conversation saying, hey, man, like that call was bad. Let's talk about it. I know what you've been through. Let's talk about it. So just being open with it is first step.
When we talk about PTS and, the men and women that deal with it, for me, for all these years, 22 years almost, I've been asked by much younger deputy sheriffs, what do you do with all of it? What do you do with all this stuff that you've seen and been involved in? And I explain it to them like this. So all these years I've been putting this stuff into boxes and I've been stacking it on shelves. We have a psychologist that's in-house with our agency who works for our agency. She runs the First Responder Project. And she told me one day, gravity will always win. The higher you stack, eventually the boxes are coming down, and that's the point in time where you've got a problem. I don't think that that's happened yet. However, I've tried my best through guidance and using the tools that have been given to me to slowly try to unpack some boxes. And going back to what he mentioned about family, that's where I've noticed most where these things come to fruition because of the same thing, coming in the house, dealing with, the personnel, and then you see your wife, you see your children as personnel too, not treating them like, not thinking of them as deputies, but your attitude and demeanor.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that as I've gotten older, I've gotten more sensitive to things as far as the PTS and where I think I deal with it in crowds, like a church vestibule after church. I literally just I have to get out of it. There's things that trigger me now more than they ever did. So one of the aspects that we have in place with us is that psychologist, because things get out of our realm of ability really fast, especially with the younger generation. And we point them in the direction of what's called the SHIELD program and to her. But PTS manifests itself in so many different ways in people. Some shut down, some get hypervigilant, some get hyperactive, some cry. I'm probably more towards the hypervigilant side and the crying it. Like I've told my wife before, the SPCA commercials during Christmas. Like I noticed I sit and cry at like what's going on, and I just thought, well, I'm getting soft, which goes back to that generational thing that I've really worked so hard to bring myself out of that thought process. But a lot of that is just the years and the accumulations of carnage and seeing human bodies and human beings treated and morphed through traffic crashes in ways that the statistic is that an average citizen, and I mean average respectfully, would see 2 to 3 things that are very upsetting in their lifetime. Us in our world see 3 to 5 a week during a shift
Yeah,
rotation.
that would be tough. You know, you both have mentioned this about not taking it home to the family. I was talking to Deputy Kemp last week, and Deputy Kemp is a chaplain with St. Johns County Sheriff's Department, and he's also a youth pastor. And I'm like, what is that like? I mean, when you're in this world, like what you're talking about, the hypervigilance, imagine going into a youth group. You know, you get it in the vestibule, fill that up with a couple hundred teenagers.
You want to beat them all.
Okay, we got somebody to talk to after the session. And I was asking him this, how do you separate that? And like what you're saying, he didn't say the boxes thing, but it was something very similar, where you have to recognize those things are happening, so that the more you become accustomed to recognize PTS, recognizing the things that trigger you, you can develop healthier ways of coping with it than burying it or trying to escape it until it blows up in your face. And that as a youth pastor, he has to pretty much do that all the time, so that he doesn't treat those individuals the same way that, you know, you're dealing with traumatic situations and people that are in trouble all the time. And he deals with a lot of it in the correctional facility. So how do you guys have any like tricks how to not take it home? Or what you particularly do?
Well, like we always heard the question, how do you deal with bad calls, or how do you deal with the PTSD? How do you deal with this kind of stuff? And to be honest with you, I think it's different for every person. There are healthy ways to deal with them, and there's unhealthy ways to deal. I always use the illustration is somebody with a gunshot wound. If I put a Band-Aid over it, I'm not going to be able to see the hole anymore. But that doesn't mean that what's inside is still not killing them. So what you have to do is you got to find the problem to be able to fix it. So kind of lost my train of thought on that one. But
how do you not take it home?
Yeah, so not taking it home is it's being able to communicate when you're at the fire station or at the police station and stuff, and being able to get it home. But again, with going back to my relationship with the Lord, I'm able to separate my work life and my home life. When I leave the fire station, I leave the fire station. And it's not that easy for everyone with coping mechanisms. Some people want to put the Band-Aid on, like I was saying, but they want to put the Band-Aid with alcohol, or they want to put the Band-Aid on with drugs or pornography, or there's so many different variables that would go in the negative route. And again, all it's doing is covering it up. It's not fixing the issue, it's covering it up. So being able to find that healthy way out. There's diet, there's exercise, there's just something that makes you happy. And you were talking about earlier about the Bible says it's not good for man to be alone. And I can't agree with that more, especially in this line when if you go off by yourself when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, the idle mind is a devil's playground. So if I don't have somebody that I'm able to talk to or get it there, well, now where's my mind going to go? So having a support system like this is going to be huge to be able to deal with that kind of stuff and give you options of how to leave it at home.
Yeah.
And in our world, we literally spend more time with each other day in and day out than we ever do our families. And you do start to take this stuff home. And what I've learned for myself is you have to start to develop emotional maturity. And I say that very carefully because in our world, we're like young-minded guys and men and women with guns and fire trucks, you know, but at the same time, we are professionals. And the emotional maturity is my awareness of seeing the reaction of my family to my demeanor when I come home. I just read a thing the other day that said that for a child to have their parent come home late all the time is fine for the child. It does not bother them near as much as the attitude that the parent comes home with. those are strong words. They're powerful words. I'm not perfect. I have come home and just not made the conscious decision to turn it off because we're so constantly in that mindset of being a cop or being a fireman and looking, and we have to be stimulated all the time almost. It does become an addiction. However, it's the emotional maturity, and that's something that, especially at my level, having the ability to mentor these young men and women who don't have families yet, but I can say, sit down, young man. Let me show you some pitfalls you want to stay the heck out of. Yeah. And this is how. And that's number one, loving them from the beginning, making sure that they understand they're important. And it is a big deal to speak of and talk about things that can make life for them hell when it comes to family and having families, so that, it's no mystery. We don't have good statistics with families, and, our divorce rate is very high, and that comes along with the job and the mental aspect. But on the flip side of that coin, there's the mental aspect of the wife or the husband and the children that's being affected too. But if we can get to them young, our sheriff he's always got his wife with him, and he uses that as an example of, I'm successful. This is a picture of it can be successful, but loving these young men and women early on to make sure that once they do have the family unit, it stays intact. Is it a struggle? Absolutely. Does it come with issues? Absolutely. But we have to be steadfast and diligent.
And something you said I think is important is to be present. Like, you can get home, but if your attitude is bad, it's worse than if you're not there. When you're present, be present. And for me as a pastor, and maybe this will help you as well, because anybody can take work home with them, whatever your career is. If you can do a couple little exercises, one of the things I try to do, and it's certainly when my kids were small, is when I get in the driveway is turn everything off, no radio, no phone, take 30 seconds and I just say, God, prepare me for whatever is on the other side of that door. Because I don't know what's going on in there right now, but you do. And just so that way it helps me just switch that gear so that I go in and I'm present, because they need me to be there. And whatever little things you can do, the point is, or take some time before you get home to talk to somebody or something so that you can decompress a little bit so that you're present when you're present. Were you going to say something?
Well, what you read my mail, what that's called as a therapeutic ritual. And so what
you got great terminology, man.
Vocabulary is fun.
What was the first
moral
one?
injury.
Moral injury.
Oh man, moral injury.
Rituals. I'm taking these. These are good.
But when I was coming back from the Middle East with the Army, we had these check marks. On this day, we turn in our body armor. On this day, we turn in our firearms. On this day, we fill this paper. And it was a check mark. And you could watch the men and women as we got closer to the end become more human again, more themselves again. Because we had that time to process. First responders, EMS, law enforcement, firemen and women, they do that every day. So it's not a 9-month, 1-year rotation. It's every day I leave the house, I may not come home. This may be the last time I kiss my spouse. This may be the last time my kids see me. And so they have to put it on and take it off every single day. And those therapeutic rituals help us do the putting on and taking off. And it can be something as simple as a prayer in the driveway. It can be before I say anything to my family, I go to my room and I symbolically put my firearm in the safe. I put my uniform back on the rack. I put my boots in the closet in the same place. Whatever that ritual is, it has to be repeatable. It has to be meaningful, and it has to be something that you have connection with, and your brain will allow you to flip that switch to move from this is at work and this is at home. And we can all do that.
Yourself that
yes.
way. That's really, really good.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that. That's I use an illustration for people that text in to Next Rung. And I picture us as a 5-gallon bucket, empty 5-gallon bucket, nothing in it. Well, every bad call we go on, I'm going to get a cup of water, I'm going to pour it into that bucket. Every fight that I have with my spouse, I'm going to pour a little bit into that bucket. Every stressful situation I'm put in, I'm going to pour a little bit into that bucket. At first, it's not a big deal. It's just a cup poured in a 5-gallon bucket. Over time, that bucket's going to continue to fill up, fill up, fill up. And by the time these guys are texting into us, their buckets are overfilled. They're overflowing. So I tell them, I'm like, listen, there's no timeline on when you need to empty that bucket. So if you get a bad call, empty your bucket immediately. Be done with it. So like you're saying, sit in the car and pray, like whatever you need to do. If it's spending time with your kids, if it's going and playing basketball, whatever it is, that's emptying your bucket. Talk about it. That's emptying your bucket. Just make sure every day you're starting with a fresh bucket.
That's good. That's really good. One last thing from each of you. Is there one last thing you'd want to say about mental health, about dealing with these types of things? And then we'll turn it over to Gabe and Carla, and they'll get us ready for our lunch break and then the workshops after that. Any last thoughts from you guys on the importance of mental health, or anything you want to say to first responders? Oh, I was going to say also, the therapeutic ritual would probably also be good for family members. I don't know exactly what it would be, but I know that when your spouse goes off to work, and just like he said, you don't know if you're kissing them for the last time, maybe there is a therapeutic ritual you could develop as well to help you deal with the stress of releasing them out to those dangerous situations. So, any thoughts?
Just in closing, and we're going to talk more about this in our breakout session if it's something you're interested in, but to solve internal conflict, whether it's trauma, whether it's fighting with your spouse, whatever it is, when you've got something inside of you that is not where it's supposed to be and you don't have peace, there's 3 steps to it. And the first part is admission. I have to admit that this is real. I went through this trauma. I am struggling. The second part is integration. This is now part of my life story. I went through this process. I experienced this thing. And the third part is transformation. Whether I'm speaking with somebody, I have a new identity, a new way of seeing myself. And from a spiritual point of view, we know that God's the only one that can provide true transformation and make us into new creatures. So
That's excellent.
Admission,
That's
integration, transformation.
That's great, James.
I know the mantra on the bands on the back of the shirt, no one fights alone. That's something that Next Rung has always put forward, that nobody's fighting alone. All of our peer counselors or peer support team members have all been where you are. We have people, former military guys that have PTSD from being at wartime. We have guys that have struggled with alcoholism. We have people that struggle with like drugs. We've had females that have had sexual assault. Like, we have every aspect of what you could ever possibly think of. We have somebody on our team that has dealt with that. So when I say you don't fight alone, we have been there. Our guys have been there. You're not the first one to go through all this stuff, and you're not going to be the last, unfortunately. But when we say you're not alone, you are 100% not alone. We are there to stand with you and give you the resources that you need to get better.
I'm glad you said that, because that really is what this is about. No one fights alone. That's what I was trying to say earlier with the community aspect, is you got to be connected. Were you going to say something else, Trey?
There's a kid's book called The Monsters Outside, and in our chosen profession, we train for the monsters outside all the time, constantly. But within a leadership responsibility, what's more important than that to me is the monsters on the inside that are created because of the monsters on the outside. And one thing I do want to stress for those of you that are in leadership positions in your agency or your department, and you don't have to have anything up here or on your sleeve, you know that. Make sure that you are letting these younger generation know, first and foremost, that it's okay. That the monsters are always going to be outside, but the ones inside, we can get them out, whether it's through faith, prayer. If some maybe aren't believers, there's other ways, other methods that are, through psychiatrists, psychology.
Yeah.
But if you don't start with the first step being and making sure they know and understand, I love you and I love your family, you might as well, the rest of it is just fodder at that point. And that's something I know I stress in my leadership, and we do, is we come at them from the very beginning. I love you. That takes away the worry of the stigma. That takes away the worry of, are they going to condemn me? Look at me as weak. I love you, and I'm here for you, and I know what you're fixing to go through. I know about the monsters outside, and I definitely know about the ones that are inside.
That's really good. Thank you so much for that, Trey. That's really good. You kind of reminded me of something that I heard a long time ago. T.D. Jakes, a famous pastor, he said, my greatest enemy is the enemy with enemy. Like, that's my biggest issue. And recently was reading a book that you guys that do this, you have kind of a warrior, calling. And in this book I was reading is that the warrior is not ready for battle until he's come to know peace. It's learning to deal with that thing on the inside. that prepares you for the things on the outside. So thank you guys. All three of you did an amazing job. They'll be around and be able to answer questions. Some of them will be at some of the breakouts. But can we give these guys a hand for what they've shared with us today? Thank you so much. You guys did amazing. That was great stuff.